Welcome everybody to our September 1st, right before Labor Day for you folks in the US, but we know we have people that join from all over. So put down in the chat where you're joining from, please. Put your name, where you're joining from. If you want to connect, your LinkedIn profile. If you have any job opportunities at your company in the Agile space, or you're searching for, just express yourself in chat. Okay, and so today we are here for the Leader SIG, and as you can tell, we are an umbrella. We are under the umbrella of the Agile Austin organization right there. Yes, I've been a member of it since 2009. It's terrific, and I will mute anybody that joins off mute. We connect, collaborate, and grow on all things Agiles. That is what we do. Quick then introduction. Okay, our guest speaker, Zach, will introduce himself afterwards. I would like to introduce myself now. Max Akesi. I founded the Leader SIG back in 2010, so we're pushing 13 years now. I'm the Agile Austin president presently. I've been so for 2+ years, been on the board for about 5 years. And as I said before, I've been a member of Agile Austin since 2010. And my day job, I'm an IT senior manager at PayPal. And what we do here, we just share best practices all around leading Agile transformations. And that is like a whole plethora of things. But anybody that is trying to lead an Agile transformation, anybody that is trying to learn how to do it, or just wants to hear or share some best practices, that's what we do here, okay? And we meet first Friday of every month. And we've been doing this, as I said, for 12 years. And the last point, how we are different, it's interesting when you're involved with something for 12 years, you notice trends a lot. When we started this Leader SIG back in 2010 at the Computer Associates office at the 360 Bridge in Austin, we were talking about teaching people about Scrum, emphasizing what the Agile values are and the principles, in case people didn't know about the manifesto. We were doing a lot of like story point estimation and all these basic things. Now, fast forward to the last 4 or 5 years, Agile has gone so mainstream that what we touch on now is like challenges of transformation as you're scaling it, psychological safety, empowering people, like so many foundational things that need to be in place for an Agile transformation to succeed. But it's interesting to see how we have evolved on the topics that we focus on. I think it's always interesting to see what has happened in the last 10 years, and who knows where we will be 10 years from now, what we'll be talking about in 10 years from now. I always tell people the best thing to do is just to go to our site, agileaustin.org. I'm going to put the site in the chat, but our site is awesome. We revamped it 2 years back, and we have all the information you need about sponsorships, memberships, info, special interest groups, all the various stuff. So I just encourage people to just hit the site, and if you're interested to learn more about us, okay? Shout out to our sponsors. I will put the links to our sponsors in the chat. If anybody, we have a couple of new sponsors that have pinged us, and if you know of anybody, or if your company's interested in becoming an Agile Austin sponsor, please go to our site. There's a way to do an inquiry and everything, and we will get to you. We have a sponsors page specifically with all the offerings and stuff. Shout out to everybody. Just in the interest of time, not going to go through all the details now. And I tell people the best way to just keep informed of all the meetups that we do that are free of charge, to just join them and stuff, is to sign up for our Agile Austin meetup page. I put the link in the chat. We have about anywhere between 5 to 7 meetups that happen every month. That is like a really high amount for an Agile organization. And and they're all awesome. Like if you want to learn about coaching, we have that one. Leader one is here. The scaling one is awesome. If you just want to be part of a book club, Ned has had the book club for years now, and it's terrific, right? I don't read as much as I should, so the book club is the only one I've not done yet. But you know what? I told Ned, hey, I've got a book that I've been trying to read for 7 years. If you do it, Drive by Daniel Pink, can you do me a favor? Then I'll come, okay, to start with. But please do that. And all our content is recorded and put on our YouTube channel. Okay, so we've got like dozens and dozens of stuff on the channel. The board, me as president, Lee as vice president, Angela as our chief product officer, Ben as chief technology officer, our CTO, and Scott Keeling, who was one of the founding members of Agile Austin back in 2007, is our treasurer, right? It's great to have people that have been around forever, new people, and any questions or even to tell us how great we are as a board, just shoot us an email, okay? And I'll put that info also on the chat and stuff. And volunteer site is out there on our site too. If anybody has an interest in volunteering, just ping us. We have a lot of cool people that join us all the time, and it's a great learning opportunity for everybody, the volunteers and for the people that are in the organization as members. Not going to spend too much time on COD 2024, but it's happening. Thursday, March 7th of 2024, we're doing COD in person again. Last year we had it in person. This year we are going to do it again. Our site is going to go live probably next week, and tickets are going to go on sale, October 1st. So our first thing is going to be to focus on speakers and sponsors, and then we are really trying hard to make tickets available at a very affordable price, $200 or less. And as always, discounts for our members, okay? But Agile growth mindset, that's going to be our focus, our theme for COD 2024. Okay, if you know anybody that's interested in being speakers or sponsors, just tell them communications are coming up, okay? We're coming back from the summer holiday. Yay! Hope everybody enjoyed themselves while we took the time off. This is our first SIG after 3 months of being off. Gardner will be talking to us today of digital transformations for Agile practitioners, and he will do the introductions of himself and everything in a few seconds. And Jason Murillo, who is a longtime Agile Austin member, he's been a bit out of the loop in the last few years, so pulling him back in. He's a VP at UShip here in Austin, and me and him are gonna do a guided discussion session of scaling Agile and customer value delivery, okay? As we transition off to Zach, our speaker for today, thank you everybody for joining and being a part of this. You make it possible. And I will stop sharing. And Zach, round of applause for our speaker, Zach, today. Yay. It's kind of hard over Zoom to get the applause. There you go. There you go, Fred. Thanks for the virtual. If some people could add a virtual signal of some sort out there. There you go, Heather. Thank you, Joanne. There you go. Okay, let's stop it and hand over. Thanks for being here, Zach. Let's do it.
No, thank you for having me. This presentation's been incubating for about, I think I first talked about it in like February or March. So we're not quite to fully gestation yet, but we are fairly close.
Let's do it.
Share. All right, you all can see my screen, seeing someone walk allegedly in New York City, right?
Yes. Yes.
Cool beans. So, like Max said, thank you very much for having me at the Agile Austin Leadership SIG. I'm Zach Gardner, Chief Architect here at Keyhole Software. We are based in Kansas City. We have a few people actually at our company that live in Austin, and I actually applied to speak at South by Southwest next year. So, we'll get to see if that actually happens or not. We work, as you probably guessed, in the software development field. We work with companies as small as 2 or 3 people all the way up to 60,000 person health systems in New York City. What we do, I mean, it honestly just depends. Sort of the best way to think about it, and so you all can, kind of understand my particular biases. When you develop software, it's always a risk, but the payoff could always be great. And what companies need to do now to get a competitive advantage against all the other firms in their field is develop custom software. There's a lot of ways to do it, Agile being my preferred methodology. But ultimately, when a company needs custom software, they have a lot of choices. They could go Safe, they could go Scrum, they could go Agile, they could go to a number of different firms to help them do that. Our pitch is always, don't go with the lowest cost option, just like you wouldn't go with the lowest cost option if you were looking to replace the roof on your house. I mean, if you really want to think about it, software is the thing that drives businesses forward. And why would you want to risk working with anyone but the best, with Keyhole being, sort of selfishly and biasly the best? I'd say that's 50% of what we do. If you want to know the other one, just ask me later. It usually works better to do that in person, but just add me on LinkedIn and we'll talk about it. So my role at Keyhole as the chief architect, I'm kind of like the fun uncle that shows up to family events, gets to regale people with interesting stories about what's going on in the world. And I always try to keep a pulse of where things are going. We rode the Agile wave when it got really popular, many, many years ago. And we always try to make sure that we're staying up on the trends that are coming through in our field, trying to figure out where exactly it's going to apply for enterprise software development, and just to make sure that we know really like what's coming down the pipeline. That's really where this presentation came from. We all started hearing about digital transformation probably about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. So we dug in, we looked at what are the things that make up a digital transformation, what are the things that people say it is, but it actually isn't, who's making money off of it, how do you define it, and then more importantly, how is it going to affect our daily lives? Kind of like you alluded to earlier, Max, the leadership SIG really is focused on, like what are trends? What are the things that we need to be doing today to prepare ourselves for in the future? So that's sort of the broader context of what I'll be talking to you about today. What digital transformation is, what digital transformation isn't, and then sort of wrapping it up with where exactly we see it fitting in the broader ecosystem of custom application development. So to begin with, there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of go about when you don't know a subject, trying to figure out what this thing actually is. When I started this, I could have gone to ChatGPT and asked it, what is digital transformation? But that would have been back in February. ChatGPT, just been released. It wasn't trained off any relevant data, so I didn't get much. So I was like, all right, well, shoot, that didn't work. So I had to do a little bit of legwork. My first approach to try to figure out just what this means is to figure out who's actually making money off of this, with the thinking that if someone is willing to invest some capital and achieve a digital transformation, they probably have a pretty good reason to make that investment. So the 2 biggest firms that I found, and I'm not picking on them because they're competitors, they're just the 2 that I found that were the easiest to find, tried to define digital transformation in the ways that I have highlighted, which I've read them multiple times. I've tried to see them through a bunch of different lenses. And after about a week or so, these were the best definitions I could find. And I still it's like I know what all of these words mean individually, but when you put them together, I don't understand what's trying to be communicated. So it could have been, that I'm just dense. I have been, accused of that before, sometimes properly, sometimes improperly, most of the times properly. So I was like, all right, shoot, well, that's a dead end. I mean, I know people are paying for this thing, but I don't really have a good idea of like what it is. So then my next approach of attack, I'm kind of taking an agile approach to this, trying to see things iteratively, see it through different perspectives, kind of refine my knowledge as I go along. I was like, all right, well, let's not look at the firms providing these services. Let's instead look at the firms that have published documentation or newspaper articles or PR releases saying, oh, this is how we digitally transformed ourselves. This is what we did to do it. And of that, I came up with about, I think I have 10 case studies probably in this. So we'll just kind of work through them. I'm not going to read the slides. I'm human beings, we grew up around fires at night, where the local village shaman would tell stories. Like we're visual people. We like stories. So I'm not going to bore you just reading these, but as I'm kind of going through them, kind of pick out a few keywords. So DHL, I'm sure you all are familiar with DHL. We don't get a ton of packages from DHL here in the US. It's typically more over in Europe where it's popular, or maybe that's just Kansas City. I can count on one hand the number of times I got a package from DHL. But they were the first firm that I came across that said they have successfully completed a digital transformation. And what that meant for them was digging into pain points that their customers were experiencing and figuring out how to use technology to solve it. The best example that they gave was they created a chatbot. And I think they did this back in 2018 or 2019. So definitely before the proliferation of large language models. So, just keep that in mind. This is not a GPT. This is a chatbot using, I don't know, probably Microsoft or an Amazon technology. But it allowed customers to just ask where my package is, which if you think about it, a shipping company, that should be one of the things that it is absolutely easiest to do for a customer at any time to ask where their package is. It kind of begs the question, if a customer has to ask where their package is, it's probably because they're thinking about it, wondering where it is. So maybe you actually need to expedite the ability for the packages to get to the customer sooner so that they aren't wondering where their package is. But anyway, that was what they did for a digital transformation. I mean, they also made it easier to generate QR codes, but their transformation really was identifying a key customer pain point and figuring out how they could use technology to solve it. The next was Disney. Now, I actually remember when Disney Plus came out because we got the subscription in our office and then we watched Mandalorian, like the very first episode, like the day that it dropped. Their transformation was somewhat similar. They realized that there was an untapped market for adults that wanted to watch their favorite TV shows when they were kids. And when COVID hit, they realized that there was a huge pent-up demand of parents who had a lot of time on their hands to take care of their younger children, but they also had to work and they couldn't send them to daycare anymore. And Frozen 2 had just come out a few months ago. So lo and behold, serendipity happened. They had a platform that could solve through technology the parents' pain problem of what am I going to do with these kids all day? And they released Frozen 2, not behind a paywall. If you had a Disney Plus subscription, you could do it. And I vividly remember my family taking advantage of that. And we probably watched Frozen 2 at least 10 times in the first week that it came out. So they got a little bit of tailwind on that. Their digital transformation, connecting people to their content, very serendipity. But again, they dug into a customer pain point and then they had a technical solution for it. Casey's, I don't know if you all have Casey's gas stations down as far south, at least here in Kansas, we do. There's actually one down the street from here, and people love going there and getting their pizza. Casey's actually is one of the biggest pizza shops in the entire nation, probably second only to, I think, Costco.
Wait,
Which
so
is,
it's a gas, well, you said it's a
yeah,
gas station
it's a gas
also,
station,
and
but they have
serve
great pizza.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
I know, right?
no, we don't have them.
Okay, yeah, no,
Oh, it's
I
big
didn't
in
figure.
Iowa too, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
But in terms of gas stations, they are very advanced with their tech stack. They did a transformation where they had all of their disparate CRMs, they consolidated it into one platform, Salesforce. Now, there is just kind of an aside. There is no one single tool that will make you digitally transform. Digital transformation is not a means, it is an end. How you choose to implement a digital transformation, that's where the technology comes in. But if you really want to understand what a digital transformation is, it is a philosophy, it is a way of mind, and I hope you're all starting to sort of see a pattern behind these. One of the other things, this is kind of near and dear to my heart. You know, the client that I consult for is actually a health system out in New York City, and I have, you know, 2 young children, and I very vividly remember their first time going to the hospital. It's very scary for a little kid going into a hospital. My youngest had to get her tonsils out, and she was one of the first surgeries after they opened up the OR from COVID because of how like terrible her sleep apnea was. And for her, like just walking around, like there's lots of noises, there are lots of people, and when you have to give an MRI to a kid, I mean, that's kind of scary. Like you get put in one of these tubes, there's lots of loud noises, you have to be still. Kids are not good at being still. I have 2 young kids under 10, I can attest to that. So the children's the CS Mott Hospital for Children up at the University of Michigan was like, all right, well, let's make life a little bit simpler. We know these kids are scary. Well, these kids are scared of MRIs, so let's make the MRIs a little less scary. Let's make it like a submarine. So as you can see from the picture, they put little fish on there, they kind of decorated it. Now, this probably cost them maybe like a few $1,000s at most. Like it's really not a lot. But for the kids that are going through and having to get an MRI, you know, you don't just get an MRI for fun. It's because like maybe you've broken an arm or broken a leg and you need, you know, or you're having like a brain scan or like an internal scan. Like you're there because something went wrong. And if you can make life just a little less scary for these children, the parents are going to appreciate that immensely. Here in Kansas City, I don't think I included it on any of my slides, but we have a children's hospital that also did a digital transformation. And in their burn unit for children, they have a sort of a sensory room where as the children are walking through, they have butterflies that are digitally projected on the walls. The kids get to pick the sounds and the colors in the room, and it helps them take their mind off the fact that they have burns all over, you know, sometimes 2nd and 3rd degree burns all over their body. It's little things that you can do to make life just that much better for people. Now, I mean, you know, kind of on the other end of the spectrum, you know, I'm a graduate of the University of Kansas. NCAA tournament has always been very near and dear to my heart. And one of the things that came out, I believe this was last year, was YouTube TV allowed you to do split view. My friends and I, whenever we watched the NCAA tournament, we've always had to set up 4 different TVs because there would always be 4 different games going on at once. But with the split view, they were able to take a customer need, that is people that are fans of college basketball, not wanting to have all these different devices set up running concurrently, and instead provided them a very simple technical response to that need. Levi's, you know, we all probably wear Levi's. They realized very early on in COVID that their brick and mortar strategy would not work. So instead, they were actually one of the early adopters of using artificial intelligence to recommend flash sales. They use RPA, which is or robotic process automation, to help streamline some of the things where it's like, you know, if they have clunky user interfaces that it would take a person 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 clicks to do, you can use robotic process automation to be able to automate that so that you don't have to rewrite the user interface. You just have to write something on top of it. You know, the list goes on and on and on. John Deere, I also like, you know, just kind of being in Kansas, you know, kind of a farmer, but farm tech, I think actually has some really incredible uses of digital transformation. I don't know if you all have seen the videos, but they can have these drones that are like circling over these fields and use the drones to be able to coordinate the machinery, the combines on the ground so that you don't have to have a human in there. And they can get the precision of these combines to within like 6 inches of each other. So they are just covering these fields back and forth with a much higher degree of accuracy than any human could. And also, if you're into organic farming, they have the ability on these machines to zap weeds and to zap pests, but they can use machine learning to be able to tell like what is a weed and what is not a weed. So you don't even need pesticides for some of these crops anymore. You could have these machines just sitting out there just zapping all this stuff. So this is probably not, this is definitely not what I thought I was going to find when I got into digital transformation. But I was really surprised at sort of the depth and the breadth and how this can then apply to what we do on the Agile side. So the big reveal, what digital transformation actually is. There's a lot of opinions out there. And the lens that I see everything through, honestly, is I'm a developer of applications. I live and breathe creating pleasing user interfaces, building APIs and middleware, designing databases, using cloud services like Azure and GCP to be able to connect users with their data in a more elegant and more effective fashion. That is the bias that I'm seeing everything through. So just so you know, that is where my definition comes from. But what I feel digital transformation is connecting the needs of our users with technology to solve their problems. That's it. That is when I dug down, when I got to the very bottom layer, when I opened up all the boxes, that's what I found at the very end, which for us on the Agile side is actually awesome because think about everything we do in the Agile process. When you go to create a story, what's the first thing that you do? You write your acceptance criteria. You write your as a blank, I want to blank so that I can blank. There's a lot of blanks that our users apparently like to do, but it's always as a user, as a call center agent, as a nurse. So thankfully, we've already been doing this for quite some time on the Agile side. It's really just the rest of the world that is slowly catching up. But there's a catch.
So Zach.
Yes, good
Sorry.
place to pause. Yes.
Yeah, sorry, because I had my hand up and I just wasn't sure if it'd be a good place to
Stop me at any time.
answer a question. Okay, no, sure, thank you. Actually, more than a question, is just sharing a brief experience because I just love everything you've said so far, and I totally hear your point about as an agilist, I'm in a very good place from a mindset perspective because I'm already thinking in a lot of these ways due to my agile values and my experience, that customer-centric focus. But you know what's interesting, Zach? I work at PayPal, so I'll use PayPal as an example, right? Probably happened in a lot of other companies. We had a huge agile transformation initiative done by McKinsey Consulting, not to pick on them, they just happen to be the one. And they brought in all this documentation, all these new trainings, phenomenal, like documentation and training and all of that. How many times did I see customer-centric stuff in all of the documentation? They're like talking about release planning and portfolio and all of these things, but then it never touched upon really having to find a customer need and then verifying that you actually delivered value to that customer need, right? It doesn't matter how awesome your velocity is and how awesome all your other stuff if you're not delivering value to that need. And everything that you talked about so far, it was awesome because all of these transformations like hit customer needs specifically, and they delivered value to those customers. And now when I fast forward to 8 years, I've been at PayPal for 2 years, how much of that content do we use from 2016? Hardly any. And that was a huge 2-year, initiative of an agile transformation, right? So I just wanted to drop in there that like, I feel as an agilist, we're at a very good place from a mindset perspective, but there's a lot that is happening in the mainstream agile space that isn't hitting the mark, right? And then I'll pause there and step away from.
No, I feel you. The things that we run into at the hospital I consult for very much echo a lot of what you said. And as I get into some of these slides, I'm actually going to be talking through some of my thoughts on how we can organically and holistically keep the user at the center of everything we do, and actually use the fact that the executives, that the CTOs, that the VPs are talking about digital transformation, and then say, hey, you know, we could actually help digitally transform our application by doing, you know, such and such and such, because that's going to get their attention. So that's actually a perfect segue into kind of the baggage behind what we're doing. My favorite example of a digital transformation that I have done, there's probably two of them that I can think of. I'll go to the more recent one first. We were working with some of our nurses at the hospital that we create software for, doing what's called a ride-along, which I don't know if any of you do ride-alongs, but they are absolutely eye-opening. To see how people use your software sometimes is less important than seeing how people are misusing your software in ways that you had never intended it to be used for. The particular nurse that I'm thinking of, super nice, like she's, you know, very lightly technical. I mean, she's like, you know, she's like most people, like most nurses. Most nurses grew up with the dream of helping people, sick people, get better. She didn't grow up with the dream of using an EMR on a web-based browser on a laptop that only has like 4-ish gigs of RAM on a good day. So she is a, you know, very lightly technical user. And so we asked her to kind of work through her workflow, because we were going to be working on prioritizing some different asks, and we just wanted a user's input on some of the features that we were developing, you know, very simple stuff. So we get into this room, we have her share her screen, and then she starts opening up multiple tabs on her browser. And we were kind of quiet for a little bit because we wanted to see like what would happen. And what you have to do in our application, because it has data from Medicaid, they have to do a multi-factor authentication to get into the application. Again, something that we developed very, very myopically. We weren't really thinking through the implications of it when we did it. So every browser tab that she opened, she had to do a multi-factor authentication into it, even though she had just done one less than a minute before.
Oh my goodness.
She has 3 tabs that she opened to be able to do her work. And because of HIPAA regulations, she actually, our application has a 20-minute activity timeout, but that timeout is not across all tabs. It's on a tab by tab basis. So we found out that she needed 3 tabs open because one of them is where she would do most of her work on. The second tab is where when a patient got a call and she talked with them, and she wanted to have a list on the main tab, but then actually work on the individual patient on the second tab, because she didn't want to lose her list. She always wanted to be able to see her list and work on the patient. Again, you know, not a crazy ask. The third tab she opened is when she would be working on documenting what she had talked about with a patient. Someone would call her, a coworker, a VP, someone higher up, and they wanted to know, hey, we need some research on this particular patient. Like we know that you worked with them last week. Can you kind of give us a really quick rundown? So she would have that third tab open of all these documents for a particular patient that she wasn't necessarily working on actively, but she just needed to reference for research purposes. And if she forgot to every 20 minutes, actually every 19 minutes, go into all of those tabs and move her mouse around, she would get timed out and she would have to multi-factor authentication in. Now, had we not done a ride-along with this user, we would not have realized how widely this problem had proliferated across our user base. We have, you know, a few hundred daily active users that are all doing this exact same workflow, completely unbeknownst to us. And there's no backlog grooming, there's no sprint planning, there's no steering committee meeting that we could have ever had where we would have realized or even conceptualized of a question to ask our users, saying, how are you actually using the application? Not how your VPs, not how your directors of nursing, not how your charge nurses say that you're using your application, how are you actually using the application? And had we done that maybe a year sooner, we would have been able to save the health system tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in the aggregate from time lost, simply opening multiple tabs and doing multi-factor authentications into them. Now, this is where it's not that I have a problem necessarily with Agile, but I think that there's an opportunity for all of us to become more user-centric. And we should use the fact that our leadership is talking about digital transformation to really take a hard look at what we are doing and figuring out what it is that we can actually use digital transformation for, and it should always be to better the lives of our users. The other digital transformation, I would qualify that as a digital transformation just based on the number of dollars that we save the health system by doing this. The other one, I would quantify it in terms of lives saved. When COVID-19 hit out in New York, things were pretty dire for a very long time. It wasn't until about Thanksgiving 2020 that some of the first drugs got emergency use authorization from the FDA to be able to treat at least the symptoms of COVID-19. These are the monoclonal antibodies. President Trump actually was one of the early recipients of it. I think even before he got the EUA, it was Regeneron, I believe, is one that he received. And the problem, so again, we think about things in terms of users and problems. The problem with a lot of these drugs was that the emergency use authorization was very complicated. Physicians are really good at diagnosing patients. Physicians are not good at always understanding the logical intricacies and the decision trees that go into being able to accurately prescribe an emergency use authorization medication. What ended up happening is people heard about these from their physicians, and actually this caused a DEI disparity because only the people that were really well connected with their physicians, which are usually people in higher socioeconomic classes that had a lot more disposable income and could, afford to go see these kind of doctors, had a little bit more flexibility in terms of their time with being able to work from home and take time off, and were not, sort of critical or frontline workers that could do this. They were actually receiving these medications, and all the patients that were actually at a higher percentage for negative outcomes with getting COVID-19, they actually were sort of cut out of it because they just didn't have these access to physicians. So we wanted to both make it easier for physicians to understand all the criteria that was needed to prescribe these medications and to lower the threshold so that it was easier for doctors around the New York State, the tri-state area, to be able to apply for and do the intake process for these medications. So in total, I think we ended up saving somewhere between 30 and 40,000 lives with the application that we built for them. And it was a digital transformation because prior to this, they were on phone calls with these doctors. They were paying nurses insane amounts of overtime simply to go through voicemails that the doctors were leaving because the phone bank was at capacity. What we built for them was using Microsoft Forms. They could go through. It was a very simple platform for the doctors to, answer 15 questions that led them down this other path and then this other path. We actually got to the point in this project where we were on the phone with medical directors, with VPs from across the health system. They were telling us about what changes were coming down the pipeline in terms of, where the FDA was going with particular subsets of patients like adolescents and pregnant women. And we were able to actually update the application faster than they were able to tell us this is actually, going to happen. Like we were on the call with them and we were able to, update things that quickly before the call got over. So it was only really with that mindset that we were able to kind of shed the baggage, get down to the, what is the bare bones, what is the absolute MVP that we need, always focus though on the user. That was our overarching thing. So out of that, we took a lot of lessons learned, and we used that to apply to not just this one specific project, but more in general. What are some of the things that we could do as Agile practitioners using sort of the digital transformation moniker to be able to really just help people? Now, I won't bore you by reading everything here, but the two things that I really want to emphasize that we got out of it is, first, ride-alongs. If you're not doing ride-alongs, you are missing a critical piece of feedback that can help inform what your application could be doing. Now, some of the pushback that you'll invariably get when you want to do shadowing or ride-alongs are from the people that own the prioritization lists that we work off of. We always want to think that a product owner is the end-all be-all of that prioritization list, but a product owner has to work with some business stakeholders at some capacity, whether it's a BA, at least in the health system that I work at, it's a conglomeration of people from medical directors to vice presidents to associate vice presidents. The list of features that we need to work on and get prioritized, it's something that we implement, but we do not own that list. And there is always a fear when they allow you to talk to the end users themselves, that the end users will come up with ideas that will then short circuit that process. Because most very, very large organizations are very protective of the fact that, this is their role. They need to be the one that owns this list. They need to be the one that owns these priorities. And you're asking them to flip that idea on their heads. In theory. In practice, what actually happens is that the users will then give you ideas. Sometimes the user that I talked about earlier, who had the multi-factor authentication, she didn't even realize that life could be better. She didn't realize in the aggregate how many hours a day were being wasted by all of the RNs that were using this application. So it was only by the fact that we implemented one of these sort of core digital transformation tenets, the ride-along, that we even discovered this. There's nothing she could have ever conceptualized of that would have led her to ask for this feature. So you have to be an advocate on behalf of your users if you're really going to go through and do ride-alongs.
And Zach, the funny thing about that particular story, like the first thing that hits my mind is maybe those multiple, like authentication scenarios was actually a step up from what she previously had. So it's like, it's relative. Like she's like, oh, at least I can get my work done. Before I couldn't, right? But you're like, that looks painful. And I've had the same scenario. Actually, I've had a scenario where we launched an application and we followed the end, like the customer, like through the process and everything of making the transaction. And we're like, they're only using like 10% of the functionality all the time. Like we've got all this really cool, complex stuff that they never use. Like, why did our product manager or product owner ask for all of this stuff? And like, we waited to have all this stuff together to launch it. We could have launched the MVP and just what they use primarily way early on. And then we could add the more complex stuff afterwards for some specific customers. It's like so many things, but again, user focused. I love the fact that you have it there, like need a ceremony for shadowing a real user. It should be like implemented as part of the framework. Like you're expected to do this.
Yeah,
some way.
It should be an Agile. That's how we treat it. It's another Agile ceremony, just like a backlog grooming, just like a sprint planning.
Bingo.
Once a sprint, set aside 20 minutes where you invite an end user to come and just look at what they're doing, the entire development team, because developers, like we have a habit of when we see a problem, we immediately go off mute, we try to fix the problem, we try to discuss the problem about what APIs we should be calling, what JavaScript. It's like, nope, the team has to shut up. The team cannot talk. They just have to watch, as painful as it may be. And then afterwards, CarMax actually is the one that I was talking to one of their POs there. They're the one that actually gave me the idea for this. Afterwards, you then have a debrief where everyone is like, all right, what did we just see? And how can we make this person's life better? Because it's like, so, there's really like 3 tenets in terms of having a enjoyable job. You have to be autonomous. It has to be a complex job, and you need connection to your end results. So often, I mean, software is, somewhat autonomous. We're all on Zoom. We kind of all live in our own little worlds. Very much we can do things in a in a silo. It's complex because if not, software would be easy. It's clearly not easy. But the thing we lack is a connection to our end users. And if you can structure a development team where they know the names and the faces of some of their end users, I mean, I probably know
Bingo.
40 people, 40 RNs that I work with. And it's such a humbling experience to just walk down the aisles of where all these people sit and see them using the software that you have poured your blood, sweat, and tears into. Like, that for me is a digital transformation. Like, if you remember nothing else, just remember that, like, connect your developers, get the QAs, get them to go out to happy hour with these people, or even better, watch them actually do their work. The thing that you talked about having a feature that people weren't actually using, that's actually what hypercare is. So the second practice that we have built in to every sprint cycle, it's actually after every release. The week after a release, we intentionally plan much fewer stories and tickets for the team to work on, because we want them to be devoted to watching on the logs level, as the users are using applications, generating telemetry. We want to see actually how these new features are being used in production. Production is an environment unlike any other. Things are always going to be different in prod than they are in any other environment, no matter how hard you try. And you don't really know how something is going to go until it is in production. So the mentality that we go into developing every feature with is that the team that develops it is going to have to prove in the week after it's been deployed that it is working successfully. That translates organically into different practices that people would not otherwise do. For instance, if I know that I have a director that I'm going to have to get on a meeting with 1 week after go live and show him or her, these are how many people are using this feature. These are the types of errors that we're getting from this feature. This is why we did, bugs. This is some of the conditions that we didn't take advantage of, or didn't even think about, or didn't even know about. I'm going to approach coding that much differently. I'm going to approach testing it much differently. I'm going to make sure that I have every possible log line that I could have done in there. Otherwise, if I don't have that mentality built in, if it's not part of the sprint cycle, it's easy to, as soon as you're developing a feature, you've spent,
throw it over the wall.
Yeah, you throw it over the wall, and it's like, all right, what's the next feature I'm going to work on? It's like, no, like, that's not how things could work. If you have empathy for your users, if you truly want to understand how they are perceiving your application, how they're using the application, if you spend a life in the day of all of the other examples that I gave for a digital transformation, that's ultimately what they came from, is that the teams that were implementing that software truly understood the pain points of their users, and they switched from being a software focused team to a person or a user or a needs based team. That's really what digital transformation is. You'll hear some fallacies about it as you kind of go and dig into the weeds about it. The one that my mom always said, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. So I'll try to say this correctly. If you want to be digitally transformed, you do not necessarily have to deploy every single day. Our end users like consistency. I don't know how many times I'm using a software application, like a web-based application, and then all of a sudden I log in the next morning and then everything is like moved around. Like, that sucks. I don't like that. And our users are very much the same, but we, this is a very, like technical or semi-technical crowd. Like, we know what we're doing. Most of the end users for our applications are non-technical. They like consistency. They don't like change. If you're going to make change, make it very incremental, make it very predictable. It's part of being a human. We are inherently resistant to change. So our end users actually wait until monthly training sessions, looking at our user acceptance testing environment, looking at what these features are going to be like for them in production. And then once they see them in production, then they get the light bulb, then they get to click. So we don't deploy every single day. We don't deploy every single week. We usually deploy 10 times a year for the application that I'm on, which we normally skip November and we normally skip January because of, you know, Thanksgiving and then, you know, the tail end of Christmas and then New Year's. So you don't need to do something like Facebook just because that's how Facebook does it. They have a very different use case than almost everyone else. But something you do have to do is visibility. Yeah, go ahead, Max.
Sorry, like we got a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Real quick.
I have like 5 more slides, but I don't think we're going to get through them. Also, I will actually, let me skip ahead a little bit.
Okay.
So to make sure we have enough time to go through all the questions, I'll leave
Sure.
this QR code up. If you want to take your phone, very much in the Agile spirit, send me some feedback. I love some feedback. You can use this to get in contact with me, and then I can send you all the slides that we didn't get through. But no, let's go through the questions. Do you want to MC the questions?
Yes, please. Nicola said, Zach, was that org using SAFe for their digital transformation? I suppose that wasn't a slide when you were talking about digital transformation. Well, you talked a lot about it, but you never did say SAFe. So I'm not sure which slide, which one.
So that's a good question.
Go ahead.
The organization writ large does use scaled Agile framework. We humored them. Meaning this is an Agile crew. I can kind of guess, you know, what most feelings on SAFe are, where you have to have all these different groups that align. We tried to assume that, you know, let's try to use SAFe and then let's figure out the pain points that it doesn't work. And what we ultimately ran into is with quarterly planning, our business needed us to move faster than that. And within 2 weeks, we almost always had to scrap the plan. And the people that ultimately controlled our priorities are not Agilists. They are nurses, they are doctors, they are clinicians. And try as we might, you know, maybe this is a fault of ours. We could not evangelize. We were kind of doing it half-heartedly. We could not evangelize them to the SAFe mindset. So we actually do 2-week sprints. We do planning every 6 weeks. And, you know, we really say, you know, after that planning, that next sprint, we have 80% confidence that what we planned on will be implemented. That second sprint afterwards, we have 20% confidence that everything we talked about is going to be there. So we are constantly refining, and they are totally okay with that. As long as they have a pretty good roadmap of what's coming down the pipeline and they understand that we can iterate with them, then things go well. But I mean, I know a lot of them personally, and we've been doing the software development with them for, you know, it'll be 9 years in January. So it took a few years of learning, but I think everyone gets it. Doesn't really matter what you use, honestly, as long as you have a very empathetic group that you work with.
Exactly. And I think that blends into the Shuhari kind of approach. Like you can start with something and then you enhance it to fit your needs best and everything. But I have come across some people in the SAFe space that, no, you have to do it like that. You have to follow these steps. I'm an SPC and I'm going to tell you that. And I'm like, wait, don't we adapt as Agilists? Don't we adapt? Some other thing, well, maybe comments also. Fred says, I try to coach my teams around building the empathy for the users. I really like your approach and your language, Zach. I don't know, Fred, if you'd like to chime in and say something else about that or just that comment.
No, I mean, it's just like I said in the comment, it's like, I think when communicating with the developers around empathy and even the project manager or product managers, it sometimes turns their ear off because it's like a foreign, it's a scientific word. But the way you talked about it, Zach, I thought was really good with regards to the you know, almost like the jobs to be done, the observation, and how that actually builds into the teams building better solutions.
Yeah.
Totally.
No, and Fred, I think that what I've experienced, that we do a bad job in all large corporations I've been at. You just get done with your story, you get done with your task, and you're done, and you go on to the next thing. And it's almost like things go into a black hole, even when you deploy to production. Like, few times do you, sometimes you get those email threads, right? By everyone, great job, but you never sometimes see an end user using the software, like telling you, hey, thanks for this, or some like that kind of an appreciation that shows the value of the work you do. I mean, that's priceless. I think that's priceless. And there's American Express for everything else.
I will I will caveat it and say there is a learning curve to doing ride-alongs and shadowing, because everyone has a developer on their team, and don't name them out loud, just think about them in your head. You know where I'm going with this. That takes every criticism personally, that feels like if you say anything wrong, that it was their fault, and it's not my fault.
That wasn't my code.
Requirements
That wasn't
were wrong.
my
It
code.
wasn't my code. It wasn't my problem. So I would say those people usually move around quite a bit, because Agile kind of exposes that as a negative and antithetical mindset. So that's one of the reasons why most Scrum Masters know how to, and team leads know how to control that people. But that's why it's very important to change the settings on the meeting where you're doing the ride along with the users, that participants are mute by default and they cannot unmute themselves, and even better, turn chat off.
Yeah.
If
do
you have
like
some
a
of those people on your
recording
team.
also of the session if you want to see stuff again, whatnot, but don't interrupt. Listen. It's so hard to do that, but you listen. That was that. So we have a hand up. If we could make this the last question. Igor, I believe, has a question or a comment. And while we're going through this last question, try to turn on your cameras, because we're going to take a Brady Bunch picture. Okay, folks, I know, try to complete that bite that you're having of lunch or whatever you're doing, and turn on your camera as we go through this last question. Yes, I mean, Igor.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for a great presentation, topics on transformation. I'm also in Agile transformation. I had a project. I had a lot of, succeeded, failed, etc. And it was like playing the game, like a scale of financial markets, So my question is, in your opinion, as like change managers, how can we interact with a group of people who are like negatively about Agile transformation because of bad luck experience previously? So they had a few times Agile transformation from different companies, and it was failed. And another one thing is previously they had enough responsibility, and when we did a transformation, we put like a product owner role apart. So now product owner is responsible for a project, and the leader is responsible for educating people from his team. So in your opinion, how it can be resolved, this kind of blockers, issues during the process of transformation?
No, it's a really good question. We had some of those same setbacks in the organization that I do. So in really any organization, any large group of people will have just hesitation and skepticism. Some of it, healthy. I try to always assume the best in people. The best way to get leaders to buy in is by proving what you're doing is either saving the company money or making the company money. The best is if you can then say, well, if we do this and it goes well, you might get promoted because you're going to look like the person that came in and knows what they're doing, brought in the right team, and you yourself would benefit from this financially. So I try not to ever make it you know, about them, or building empathy with users definitely helps people see the light. But most people understand they are sort of the star of the show. And if you can make it about them, if you can try to see it through their eyes and see what is important to them, and, you know, a lot of the times, you know, financially, that will be the biggest driver for them. If you can make it about them and show them how they can become the star of the show and benefit the organization as well as themselves, usually that takes care of a lot of it. So again, it depends upon every situation. That's just my gut reaction.
Yeah. Speak to people's needs, like connect with them on their needs and drive it from there. Yeah. Folks, an hour goes by so quickly. First, let's say a quick thank you to Zach. Thank you, Zach,
Thanks
for
for having
coming
me.
and talking
Thanks,
to
Max.
us for digital transformations. And now the Brady picture here. All right, everybody here that's still here. Okay, now smile. Act as if you're happy to be here. Okay. 3, 2, 1. All right, got it. Thank you. Okay. Have a good Friday. And if you are here in the US, happy Labor Day. Take care, folks, and stay agile. Okay.
So.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Until the next time.